Hey everyone, my name is Stephen Lee, and I'm a designer based in Portland, Oregon. Currently, I teach at Portland State University, where one of the classes I teach is called Creative Coding. In this class, we use processing to explore different ways to generate visuals, create interactive experiences, and maybe think about design problems in a different way. Um, I'm creating these videos for students in my class, but also for people who might be interested in learning processing. I know that I've learned a lot about processing from online resources, especially people like Daniel Schiffman, who has a YouTube channel called Coding Train. Um, and these videos and this course is actually slightly modeled around the structure of his book, Learning Processing. And for those of you who want a good book to start with, I highly recommend this book. In my own work, I've been using processing to create a lot of different types of visuals. I use it, again, as a way to think about design problems differently. Here's some work that was created by previous students in my class. Hopefully this lets you see kind of a range of possibilities. The first thing we're going to need to do is download processing from the processing website. That website is processing.org, and you can just go inside of here and download either a Windows, Linux, or Mac version. And I would also bookmark this website because there's a lot of good examples and tutorials and reference. If you're curious about how to do things and you want to see some code samples, this is like a really great place to go. So keep that in mind. And once you install that, we're gonna talk about kind of getting started, understanding the way processing works, and then writing some code. The first thing we need to understand when we're trying to plot items in space and processing is that we're going to use a coordinate system. Similar to maybe something you learned in high school math, we're going to use X and Y coordinates. X is going to be horizontal and Y is going to be vertical. This looks like maybe something you've seen in math class. And in this diagram, you can see that these four quadrants you can see have positive X or positive or negative X, and also a positive or negative Y. And you can see that the top right usually is where positive values go. But the thing about processing is that we're actually, when we use positive Y values, we're actually going to be going in maybe what we're used to calling a negative direction. We're actually going from top to bottom. And so it's a little bit of an adjustment. So here is that kind of quadrant that we're used to seeing. 0, 0 is at the top, and the positive Y, like I said, is going to be going down. Positive X is going to be going from left to right. And maybe one thing that you could do to kind of like remember this flip is to maybe think about the show Stranger Things. And if you remember the upside down, it's this kind of mirrored world, and you can see that even though we're going downwards, it's actually kind of like an increase in the value. So if that helps you at all, go for it. If not, you can remember hopefully that it's flipped from maybe what you remember it to be. And before we get into coding, just a few quick tips. Spelling is super important here. If you misspell the name of something, a function, or some other command, it's going to break the code. Case matters as well. So this is uppercase and lowercase. The way I type things, generally, like, it has to be that way. You shouldn't be making things all caps unless they need to be, or all lowercase. You might see sometimes where camel case comes into play. Spaces do not matter as much. So you might have extra line breaks, or you might even have a space inside of parentheses, and that generally is okay. You want to end your function calls with a semicolon, and it's almost like ending a sentence with a period. Hopefully you'll get in the habit of doing it if you haven't coded before. And then another really important thing is to use the processing IDE to help you identify errors in your code. So the code editor will show you where the errors are and use that to help you kind of narrow down your focus on what to look for. Started with processing. Here's the processing IDE. This is what you get when you download the program. And we're going to start coding in here. You can see that there's a run button at the top and a stop button. If you've run the program and you want to stop it, you can press this button. You could also hit Command R to run it. Yeah, let's just start with, let's see what happens when we press this button. We're going to get a default sketch running. This is just the default size. So this is a sketch, but it's probably not what we want. Let's start by specifying how large we want this to be. We're going to write some code. We're going to call this size here, and then we're going to write the X and the Y size. So that's horizontal and vertical. Let's say 500, and we'll separate by comma. 500, and we want to end these calls with a semicolon here. So it's like a period. You want to get in the habit of doing that. Let's press play. And this is a 500 by 500 pixel sketch. Okay. The next thing we might want to do is change the color of this. We can use background to just change the background color, and we're going to use numbers here to specify color. Let's start with just black and white. Colors we can think of as running from a range of 0 to 255. 0 is going to be completely black, and 255 is going to be white in this case. So let's say we want it to be a black background. We'll just say 0. Make sure you put that semicolon there. Let's run it. Command R, and that's a black screen. So if you only give one color value, it's going to think it's grayscale, black and white. So we can go to white, and that's going to look like this. Now, if you give it 3 values, it's going to think that you're using red, green, and blue values, so RGB. So let's say we wanted a red background. Again, the range is going to be 0 to 255. So let's go 255, 0, 0. So RGB, completely red in this case, right? And if we want to go to something, or let's say we want to go to blue, that's going to look like this. Or sorry, this is going to be green. Yeah, RGB. So you get the idea. Okay. And from here, let's maybe start with some really basic shapes. We can use something called a rectangle, which you probably are familiar with. A rect is going to take 4 values. One is the X position, the Y position, the width, and the height in that order. So let's say we want to start from the upper left corner, 0, 0. And let's say we want this to be 100 by 100. Oops, make sure I put a comma there. Let's run that and let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see that it created this square. It drew it from 0, 0. The default mode for rectangles is to draw in the upper left-hand corner, so you can see it's connected to the upper left. And from there, it went over 100 pixels horizontally and 100 pixels vertically. You can see that the default styling has been applied, a black stroke and a white fill. So we can go in and change those things. We could target stroke like this. And let's say we want it to be red. Let's do that. So RGB, that's going to be completely red. And let's change the fill to 0, 0. Let's make it blue, right? And let's play that, see what that looks like. All right, so you can see there's a red stroke and a blue fill. Now let's try another shape that we're going to use an ellipse, which is like a circle. This takes 4 values again. It's going to take the X position, the Y position, and the width and the height. So you could have a circle if they have the same width and height, or you could have an ellipse. You could have something that's longer or wider. Let's start. Let's do the same thing here, and I just want to show you one difference in the way that this gets drawn. So you can see that the rectangle starts from the upper left, but the ellipse actually starts from the center point. And you can see that this is the center point up here. So if we wanted this to, let's say, be in the center of this square, we would have to do a little bit of math. Probably it's going to be 50-50. And you can see that that's now in the center of that, because ellipses by default will use the center mode. And if we wanted to change the color in here, let's mix a color. It's going to be yellow. If you want to mix yellow, you can mix red and green in sort of equal proportions. Okay, so that's some basic drawing. I guess I want to show one other thing that we could do. Let's say we wanted a rectangle or a square in the center of this sketch. We could use, instead of doing the math to figure out what the center of this is, we could use width divided by 2. So width is sort of a system variable that gets created when we specify the size, and I can say height divided by 2, let's say 100 by 100. But if I ran this, you'll probably see again, it's using the upper left corner as the center point, right? And you can see that the fill color kind of cascaded down. So whatever was last specified is going to be inherited down here. Let's say we wanted this to be moved to the center. We could do the math. Again, we could probably say minus 50 minus 50. Or, let me undo that. There's something we could write called rectMode. And notice it's in camel case, this is a capital M. And you could change it by writing center in all caps. And if you did that, so this should apply to just this one. Let's see if that's the case. Yeah, it applied to this one. It didn't apply to the one up here because the code is reading from the top to the bottom, and it's being inherited. So that's what's happening in that case. So that's just a quick overview of some things you can do with drawing. I should probably do one last one, which is let's just draw a line, because a line could be helpful. Let's just draw a line in the halfway through the composition. Line takes 4 values, the x and y position of one point and the x and y position of a second point. So let's do 0 for the x. Let's do height divided by 2. Then let's do width. That's going to go all the way to the outside, and then we'll do height divided by 2. And let's make this a dark stroke, and we can also change the width of this stroke weight, and we can make it really thick. Let's make it 10, and let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that just draws a line. So this is just some basic drawing here. So shapes, a line, and we've gone over some basic ways to style this using fills and colors and strokes here.
I want to get started drawing something that's really intentional. A good place to start off is looking at an existing piece of art and try to recreate it in code. This is a piece by Josef Albers. He's done a bunch of these, basically squares inside of squares with different colors. And I think this is a good first step into coding. So what we're going to do is use this as the inspiration for a sketch that we're going to create. We're going to try to get close to this. It might not be exact, but we're just trying to make sure that these squares are generally positioned where it's in a similar fashion and the colors are generally the same. One way to get the color for this is if you're in Photoshop like I am, you can use the eyedropper tool, click on an area, and if you take a look at that color, you should be able to see the red, green, and blue values. There's also a hex code value here, which processing will take, but let's kind of stick with RGB values, which we did earlier. All right, so why don't we open up processing? And
in the past, we had just written, just started writing code saying, rect, and giving it values from there. Like, let's say we wanted to do this larger square. One way to do that is by saying rect. We'll start at 0, 0 because rectangles start in the upper left-hand corner by default. And we could, set the size for that. We actually haven't set the size yet, so let me set the size at 800 by 800 pixels. And so if I wanted to color this or get this set up, I would do the width and height of 800. And for the fill, let me set that. It's mostly green, and so these are numbers that I took notes on. This should just give me, whoops. This is a good example of using processing IDE to kind of tell you when you've made a mistake. This tells you, hey, you're missing a semicolon, and it actually highlighted the line. So can't get much easier than that. Let's press play and run this, and you'll see we have a sketch that's roughly the same color. There is a black outline on this because that's the default, so we want to turn that off. And we can do that by saying no stroke. All right. So this is kind of how we got started last with the last sketch. But I want us to also start to think about writing more complex sketches, and one way to do that is to write larger blocks of code. In processing, one good structure to work with is a void setup. Whoops. Which what this does is it runs once at the beginning of the sketch, and this is where you want to put things like size and settings that you want to apply to the sketch. The syntax here is a little bit different than these lines. What we're going to do is say void setup, and we're going to use these curly braces, and this is going to create a larger block of code, and you're going to see later on we'll have other functions or things, structures that will be within these larger blocks of code within these braces. So if you're getting started with programming, the semicolons at the end of these smaller functions here, but then sometimes you'll have larger blocks that are inside of these curly braces. So let's start writing like this. We'll say void setup, we set the size, we turn the stroke off, and again, we're running from top to the bottom. Fill, we've set that color. Let's go into the next rectangle. And if we're looking at this, this is kind of a greenish color. So it's probably going to be even more green than the other one. So you should see, I'm looking at my notes here, 165 and 72. So this is going to be more green. You can see this value is higher than that one. So you can tell that's going to be like that. So let's make a rectangle here. Now, we'll start with, let's say, 75 here. 75 in, that's the x value. This space up here looks a little bit bigger than this space here, so we should expect it to be larger. In fact, let's put in 125. And these are all squares, so we're going to have similar values here. Let's do 650 and 650. And if you did the math, if we take 75 plus 650, that's going to be 725. And so you can see that if we were drawing this out, this would be about 725. And then you'd have 75 pixels left over. So because we're looking at 800 as the size. So let's see if that worked out accordingly. So this is, you can see it's roughly kind of what we were trying to get. A little bit skinnier here, a little bit thicker up here. And now I'm just going to go through the rest of this. I'll go and find the fill color for this. 11985. So these are values that I've pulled earlier. But if you want to find the values again, you could just go into here and click here and take a look. Now, some of these values are going to be, these values might be a little bit different because,
the values here, if you look really closely, this is kind of a pixelated image. These values are kind of all over the place, so there's some variance there. All right, so let's go back into here. Let's rectangle 150, 225, 500, 500. No, 63, 101. So again, what I want to do here is make sure that the space on one side is roughly equal on the other side. So, I could do this by taking 800 minus subtracting 225, and I guess I could subtract it again, 225, and then that would give me what's left over, 350 in this case, because it would be 800 minus 225 minus 225 is going to be 350. Right, so just, and the other thing I might want to start doing is writing comments to myself in the code, because it's just good notes to keep track of. So if you wanted to write a note to yourself, maybe it's 800 minus 225 minus 225 is equal to 350. You can see when I want to write a single line comment, I can just write 2 forward slashes, and that lets me write a comment. And in fact, I should probably go up here and say, write notes to myself. This is good when you're learning, so you don't forget and you can understand it. So like, set the size of the sketch. Here we are turning off the default stroke. Here you might want to remember, hey, these are red, green, and blue values. And with the rectangle, I should say, maybe I should have done this earlier, but what's the X start, what's the Y start, and what's the width and the height? That's what these numbers correspond to. And if you want to write a longer comment, a lot of times you'll see people when they're writing sketches is to write some code at the top. If you want to write like a multi-line comment, you can use these marks, forward slash and asterisk to start the comment, and an asterisk and a forward slash to end the comment. And here you can write things like your name. So maybe I'll put my initials here, and you might leave a note to yourself. I'm going to say, this is a simple sketch to show. Okay. So you might want to put the date, 2020. It's been a rough year, but all that stuff can go in there. So let's go ahead and run this. Hopefully we're somewhere close to this. Yep. And you can see maybe the colors are a little bit different, and obviously this doesn't have the same kind of texture as the original painting, but we're just trying to figure out how to draw these to the screen and do it in a really intentional way. Now this is how I would do it using the default rect mode, but I did mention, and some of you might find it easier to set the rect mode to center, like this. And let me show you what that does. If I do that and I try to, maybe I'll just grab this one, and let me I'm going to just put a red fill on this so I can see. So in the past, this put a rectangle up in the top left-hand corner, but if we change the rect mode here, it's going to apply to everything below this, and you should see. Oh, I love getting those errors, at least seeing the errors. I don't love getting them. You can see that what happened here is I set the rect mode to the center, so now the center of this shape is up here, and you can see it's been shifted over. So some of you, this might be helpful if you wanted to set this in the center of this canvas. You could say width divided by 2. We can use width, and it's going to use whatever values are up here. And when we say divided by 2, we're just cutting it in half. Let's just put this exactly in the center. So we'll say height divided by 2.
and you can see what that would look like. It should be all red now. So there's kind of two ways that you could go about doing this. You could use the default rect mode, which uses the upper left-hand corner, or you could change it. And this might be easier for you to conceptualize, or it might be easier for you to center it, but I think there's some value in trying to do the math and understanding how this all works. All right, so if doing something like this is really easy for you, the next thing you might want to try is a more complex painting. Here's a painting by Mondrian. Hopefully you can understand maybe how to draw this. You're going to need to either use strokes to draw these lines, or you could draw skinny rectangles, right? And if this is too easy for you, maybe you want to try something like this. This could be a real challenge. The main idea at this point is to get more comfortable changing colors and drawing things onto the screen.
Okay, so I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.